We are going to have so much fun today, Brian,
Oh boy.
because,
What are we doing?
well,
Do I get ice
because,
cream?
because, usually I think that I know a little bit about what we're going to talk about. But in this case, I am a guy who, in my entire professional career, have never cared about the competition. I barely even, I mean, yeah, I'll notice and people will come and tell me what the competition is doing, but I don't care. I just do the best I can with what I got. And if the competition, anyway, but Tesla and the community, or the Tesla community, let's say, tends to like to hear about the competition. So I have to bring on an expert, and I'll probably have to just agree with everything you say. And so you'll get away with murder.
That's the plan. Yes.
Well, let's start with the United States, because I think that is the one that is more interesting to people, is what is the competition like in the United States? And from everything I can see, the competition for BEVs in the United States is collapsing on every single front. Disabuse me of my nonsensical statement, if you will, sir.
Happy to. Lightning is doing well. It is popular. It is not selling in quite the volume they'd like, but it is a beloved truck. I've even seen them, two of them, here in Europe,
Oh,
which I thought was very interesting.
very interesting.
And the notion that a Cybertruck is too big for European roads ignores the fact that Europe is a diverse place. This was up in the mountains where they need good traction and good utility. So they are work trucks here. They don't need a 9 million miles of range. The range of a Lightning is sufficient. So I think Lightning is on the right path. I would also add that Ford has their Skunk Works program that we found out about 6 months ago, less than a year ago, where they are finally building a range of EVs that will be built from the ground up, purpose-built vehicles. The Mach-E is already one such purpose-built vehicle, and it is a very good first attempt at a mass-produced electric vehicle. It is not full of the kinds of compromises we saw when they would take a Ford Focus and just jam a bunch of batteries in the back and hope that the suspension holds over time, which it kind of does, but not really. So this is hopeful on the part of Ford. I think Ford has also split out their division on paper so that we can see, hey, if you're worried that the stock is dragging a bit, you can see why. It's because we're investing in the future. And even if you want to say, well, maybe the next president or the president after that will soften on these emission guidelines and green targets, that's great. But other countries are not softening. And if Ford wishes to remain a global brand, they have to act in accordance with the markets in which they wish to do business. So I think
And the
there's still
Mach-E,
some life in
yeah.
Ford.
And the Mach-E surprised me. I think it has more to do with the charging network, which is, of course, why Ford made the decision they did with regard to NACS standard. But I thought the Mach-E was a good-looking car, and so I was a little surprised it didn't do well.
It's good looking. It drives well. There are some things that I don't like. There's essentially no frunk. It doesn't, it's a little more money than I would like it to be. I don't want a Mach-E, but I get it. There are people who like the familiar feel of the cockpit of a Mach-E over the spaceship aesthetic of the Tesla. And those design choices, unfortunately, cost money. All
Right.
those buttons and switches add a lot of cost, complexity, and time because they all have to be validated. So the Mach-E is an exceptional first effort. I'm looking forward to their next effort to see what that will be. I am not counting them out. Next, I guess we could talk about GM.
Mhm.
They're getting serious on paper, which is a good place to start, I suppose. The Silverado has something the Cybertruck doesn't. A couple things. It's got a pass-through in the bed, so you can haul very large things in your truck that you couldn't haul in most any truck on the road, let alone an electric truck. It's got a ginormous battery, so if you're only concerned about range, you've got an option. It's a brute force solution to a problem, but it's a solution that's available today. I'd rather see them make 3 compact or mid-size cars instead of one truck. But, take what you can get. And then you've got the new Blazer. That is, I saw a report. There's hundreds of days of inventory piling up. That's a dishonest report. There was a stop sale order. They had to fix something, but they didn't stop producing them during the stop sale, which meant they would have a stockpile to sell once the stop sale was released. And I believe that they have released it. I believe they're back on sale again. And the price is good. It's in the mid 40s. And that's a good price for what it is. It probably means they're losing their butts on it. And I made a video about that, and people pushed back and said, no, they're not. You and I made the video. I got a comment today. You remember, it was a week ago, saying, I got a comment today saying, you should do research. How do you know that they're losing money? Because GM said, though, that they've said, we hope to be profitable on EVs by 2026. Hope to. It's not 2026. They are losing their butts.
Right.
But they've got so much internal combustion sales they can make it. Stellantis, I have less faith. Their efforts feel very late and very half-hearted, but they're so big that they could survive. Their European division has partnerships with Chinese firms to get some cars on the road in Europe at least. Those will obviously not come to the US, but there are in-house designs that are in Europe for EVs that they could just hand over to the US division to start making cars based on those. There is hope, but there isn't a visible plan in place to get serious about electrification. In the US, we also have Lucid, who I've the least confidence in, and Rivian, who makes the best $100,000 cars you can buy for $70,000. That's not a good long-term. They're fantastic. They're fantastic. I love them. I'm concerned about the financials. I don't see how they get out from under that, apart from getting to their R3, their 2 and 3 models.
But their unit sales are also poor. This is the part that just drives me crazy as a sales guy again, which is of course what's driving me crazy about Tesla right now. It's like Rivian, if you've got all this, if this car is as great as you say it is, why aren't you selling more? Elon said that back in the days of the Model S, I believe it was, he just did this quote the other day, that he was literally outselling cars when he should have been taking care of his family. That was what he was doing 24 hours a day, was selling cars one at a time to people. Yeah. And, if I'm Rivian right now, or Lucid right now, or Fixer, right? What's her name?
Fisker. I barely know her.
Fixer. Anyway, I'd be out. You have to do what you have to do. Get out and sell. Anyway,
Henrik Fisker doesn't have the fire in his belly. He wants to be the CEO, but again, Fisker, I barely know her. So there's a lot of missed opportunities there. And Fisker, I think, is absolutely circling the drain. It's unfortunate, but there were systemic problems with the idea of having a third-party manufacture your car. And from people I've talked to at Magna, I got to meet some people last year from Magna. One of the things they said, because I've seen people say, the problem is Magna. No, Magna makes other cars. They make the Mercedes G-Wagon, the Toyota Supra, the BMW Z3. They make good cars. The problem is Fisker had design intents that didn't translate to manufacturing in a way that made sense. The California edition has quarter windows in the back that roll down. If you have to do if your 12-volt battery fails while those are in any position other than all the way up, you will have to go to a service center to get them recalibrated. Wow. Because of your front windows, what you do is there's a thing where you push the down buttons and just hold them down and they'll recalibrate. Oh. There are no down buttons on the quarter windows. It's part of a all windows down button that doesn't have the same functionality. Mistakes like that are ridiculous.
And then we always forget about the South Koreans. They are in my top 5 for 2030 in terms of producers, Hyundai and Kia. How is Hyundai and Kia doing in the United States?
I think they're doing awfully well. They found the solution to not having North American batteries that would qualify them for the IRA by pushing leases. If you do a lease, you get to take that $7,500 off the capitalization cost. Yes, you're not buying the car, but it does mean your payment will be that much lower.
Right.
So because someone is buying the car, someone is buying it and you're leasing it from them. So they can take that savings, they can pass it on to you. So that means you can get them. The thing with Hyundai and Kia is that the styling is pretty unique, a little bit radical. It's not for everyone, and I appreciate that. I think it looks cool. I think the Hyundais look cool. So why are they not selling more? I don't know. Maybe I think we still have an adoption problem that goes back to the charging infrastructure. Here in Europe,
Yes.
they have everybody has always been on the same standard. Not always, but for 98% of the vehicles ever sold in Europe are all using the CCS2 European standard.
Right.
But the network is still garbage. You still deal with handles out. You still deal with having to have multiple payment plans on your phone, depending where you're going. You can use the supercharger network. It costs extra if you don't have a Tesla. That makes sense. And the Tesla's network, we used it today. We've been using it over the weekend. It's great. It just works. Everywhere else we've been, it's a long handshake. You got to get your app out. You got to deal with the nonsense. And for non-Tesla cars in the US, that's still a hassle. Ford's overcoming it with their Blue Oval website portal that integrates a lot of those charging payments into one, makes the handshake quicker. In theory, I will work to find out how well that's actually working in practice. But Hyundai and Kia should be. I think globally they will be fine moving into the future.
All right. Well, turning to Europe, we have these German makers, and you've been in Germany now for Germany and Austria for a week or so. You must be an absolute expert on German cars. But
Very sharp on it now. Yes, very sharp. So what's going on there? If you look at BMW and Mercedes sales, they're doing good. They are growing rapidly in their EV segments. There is the problem that they are too expensive for what they are. These companies spent generations perfecting the ICE drivetrain and less than a decade trying to perfect the electric drivetrain. And what it means is that advantage that they had for all those decades has been effectively erased. They are surviving largely on the strength of their brands. They're still very good cars, but man, are they expensive. The iX is a wonderful car. It's trying to compete in the category of a Model Y, like a very premium Model Y, but it's priced like a Model X. That's a tough sell. And by the way, you don't see many X's on the road here. I've seen, even at the event, I only saw a few. What you do see tons of is the 3s and Ys, of course, and the S's, which are mostly plaids here. And I got to, of course, experience that again last night. I was going to drive it, but after someone else did, I felt queasy and uncomfortable. So I still haven't driven one. I've had the option and I declined because I got to breathe. Got to breathe, man. It is so radical. It is such an amazing machine. There's also Volkswagen. And I'm concerned for Volkswagen. They had a strong leader in Herbert Diess, and they got rid of him. I think they didn't like the fact that he was looking to Tesla and saying, look, they're doing this better than we are, and we need to get caught up with them at least. We can't overshoot them if we can't even catch up with where they are. So Volkswagen's going to have a tougher road. They've been long teasing their $25,000 car. I hope they actually make it. It remains to be seen. All those, regardless of the brand, unless they say in 6 months, I don't believe them. Anything longer than 6 months out may never happen.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
All right. So the Europeans basically making okay cars, maybe, but not necessarily priced right, not necessarily marketed, not necessarily hitting the market. Although you're saying that Mercedes and BMW are selling okay in the market.
Yes, their year-over-year sales has improved.
All right.
They are on the right, they are headed in the right direction, and it makes sense. BMW is the ultimate driving machine. You're gonna want an electric drivetrain. Mercedes is silent comfort with power. You want an electric drivetrain. There's just nothing like it. If I can hear your little race car, it's slow.
Okay, how about Audi?
So Audi, these are now we're into the sub brands,
Right.
same kind of trajectory. Audi's been making electric cars for quite a while. They've got the Audi Quattro TT that looks just like a normal crossover SUV, but is electric. It wasn't very good for a very long time. It was overpriced for a long time. It's getting better. Porsche, same kind of deal. Porsche has the luxury of being able to charge premium prices. And the beauty there is that they get to go with some radical tech, just like in Formula One, and then hopefully pass it on to the rest of the brand in ways that make sense. That's what I'm looking to see. But these cars will increasingly electrify because in Europe, I think Norway is the first country that has a complete ICE ban next year.
Next year? Wow.
Next year. They're already at about 90%. Next year, they'll be at 100%. By the end of 26, they will be by the beginning of 26, the sales will be 100% electric. But the Scandinavian countries are largely, are like 70, 80% already.
Anyway, yeah.
The rest of Europe is looking at 2030. Porsche intends to continue selling cars after 2030. So all the European brands are getting serious. They know this is looming. They would love to get an extension, but the only thing that would get them the extension is if the vehicles don't exist. And if I decide not to make them, my competitors are still gonna.
Yeah.
So that's a problem for them.
All right. We won't cover, of course, all 100 vehicle makers in China, but maybe we can look at least at BYD, NIO, and the two big, what do you want to call it? OEM makers for others, SAIC, and anyway, go ahead.
Absolutely correct. So we'll start with BYD's the biggest.
Yep.
How are they doing? Great. They've got their battery business to fall back on for profit, their stationary storage business to fall back on for profit, and some lingering hybrid sales that are still profitable. Their EVs, I believe, many of them are already profitable. Not all.
Oh,
that $10,000 car is awfully good. There's no way they're building it for $10,000. They're selling it at that price.
Yeah.
Because BYD is concerned primarily with market expansion.
Right.
And if you can sell, even at 15,000, that car, there are a lot of markets where it will sell. The BYD Seal, not the Seal, maybe it's the Seagull, that is the $10,000 one. That's available. One of my viewers said it was available in Brazil. Wow. It's not 10,000. It's more like 15 to 18,000, but that's still a very compelling price for something you can charge on Brazil's abundant hydroelectric power. Right. So BYD is going to do just fine. If they are always working to reduce their costs, but they are lowering prices just as quickly. So they will grow and crush it.
And BYD has a big advantage over the other BEV makers in China in that they have been international for a very long time. They have multiple factories already around the world. I think in Africa, in South America, I believe they have factories in both. I think Eastern Europe either already have one or they're building one. Maybe they took over a Ford factory in Eastern Europe.
So they took over a Ford factory, and I want to say Turkey or Hungary. I think it was Turkey. They've taken over a Ford factory in Brazil. Right. They make electric buses in Los Angeles. Yes. They make electric buses in Europe. They've got bus factories all over the world because those are large items. We'd rather not ship them if we don't have to. Right. And it is a good way to get your foot in the door domestically. Right. So those are there are other big advantages that they control the battery supply. Yes. So they will always have access to batteries. So BYD is in the strongest position of the Chinese manufacturers by far. Chinese national manufacturers. Tesla is also manufactures in China, but we've already discussed them. Then you've got, look at NIO. And every time I mention NIO, the NIO investors lose their minds. Oh, this week Brian doesn't hate NIO. I've never hated NIO. I just think battery swaps won't work in the US. NIO is in a tough position financially. Their cash runway is scary. It's terrifying. Um, they've promised a miracle battery and they promised a new generation miracle swap station. And if either of those was true, they wouldn't need the other. So I don't know what to believe. But what they do have is volume. They are super good at moving units. They are where Tesla was not that many years ago, maybe 5-6 years ago. They're already at those kinds of numbers, which is very promising. What's less promising is their cash position.
Right.
A lot of these companies, there's a chart on X, and I think AJ made it.
Right.
That
Or at
shows
least promotes it. Yeah.
yeah, that shows cash burn, profitability by year. And you see
Right.
all these companies diving, and only one, Tesla, has turned around and shot back to the top. And you see some of these companies are just so far in the red with no immediate roadmap to get them to profitability. These companies need to get profitable. How do they do it? I don't know. Which
Well,
gets me to
some of these companies like
SAIC, yes.
SAIC,
Shanghai Automotive something company,
right?
yes.
They make millions of cars for others, and so like a BYD, they can fall back on that primary manufacturing. Although, of course, as ICE sales dry up, they will not have that thing to the famous problem that we've been talking about for years. When the crossover takes place, when more BEVs are being sold than ICE cars, some of these companies are going to really be hurting. But to SAIC's credit, they are actively after the BEV business. You think they're losing money on their BEV sales? Because are they the ones that have the MG, or is that somebody else? I always get it. No, that's Geely. Geely, yes.
Yeah. So you're asking me if NIO is profitable?
No, SAIC. Do you think SAIC?
Oh, yes, because they have to be. They don't. Yeah, they're not a startup.
Yeah.
They have to at least cover their margins. They have to. So yeah, they're just a part supplier. It's just that the part happens to be the entire car.
Yes.
So let's talk. That's a good segue. I'll mention real quick with Li Auto, they've also got awfully decent volume, awfully decent cars, but their cash situation is terrifying. They recently teased the minivan. We're going to release this minivan. It's going to be 70 grand in China. And the market said, good luck. I wish the best for you. Take care, and we'll see you around. So when they released it, which it seems they now have, the price is more like 50. They didn't find $20,000 in savings. What they found is we have to lose 20 grand or we're not going to sell any. So that's tricky. But let's talk about Xiaomi. Xiaomi is fantastic. You and I have had a number of conversations about this, one or two. Xiaomi, I was deeply skeptical. I was convinced that a smartphone company could make fantastic user interface and software, and it appears they have. What I was less convinced is that they could actually build a car and that they could actually ramp production. But then we saw their initial sales, and they're strong and they're high and they're ramping very. And I was like, wait a minute. They don't build the car. SAIC builds the car.
Oh, is that
so
right?
Of course. So we've got their competencies. Can you hear that?
No.
So we've got their competencies to lean back on, the manufacturing there, where they can actually just order more. It's imagine if everyone had to order their own batteries. They don't order their own batteries. They don't get them that way.
Yes.
So it works. Who else is in the market
Geely,
you wanted to?
Geely, because don't they make the Polestar?
Yes. Right?
I think they make the Polestar and the MG.
I'm trying to remember because the Volvo Polestar division is kind of separate so that they can actually export to the US without paying the import tax, because Volvo of North America exports to China in greater volume.
Right.
I don't remember offhand. But Geely is, I think, the one that owns MG.
Right.
And
a bunch of other brands.
They're
like the second or third largest maker of cars in China.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't know the answer to that. I don't have good information on them. I haven't looked at them as much recently.
Yeah, yeah, and this is why I don't go to this subject very often, is because it's a very big subject. There's tremendous amount of work that has to be done to dig into each of these companies and what they make and who they make for, and even finding out sometimes how many BEVs they're selling, because they commonly scramble it with the number of hybrids, and you can't separate the two. So it becomes a very difficult challenge. I did this about a year ago. I spent literally, I think, 30, 40 hours and was still not getting 100% information out of it.
That's very frustrating. Increasingly, it's being broken out. I know BYD's been breaking out theirs. I know a lot of these other companies are pure electric plays, so it's getting easier. And China will have their ban coming into effect, I think, in 2030. So the world is going electric, and it's going to be quiet, and it's going to be wonderful.
All
Any
right,
other
right.
brands? Oh, there's one last brand we forgot,
Oh,
VinFast. Deeply
okay.
concerned. Deeply concerned. The car's apparently gotten a lot better. Sales have not. Their plan for a factory in the US has been put on hold because, of course, it has. It would
Yes,
cost billions of dollars,
yes.
and they don't have billions just sitting around. And people have said, well, the founder is a billionaire. He can put more money in. But about a year and a half ago, he said, I will not. I'm done putting money in. This thing needs to pay for itself. I am not going to go into bankruptcy the way Elon almost did with
Yes.
Tesla. And I will add to this in kind of conclusion. You're asking, can other companies make these cars? Will companies make these cars? The answer so far is yes, but what they can't do is make cars that are compelling enough at a price that people were willing to pay with any profit at all.
Yeah.
And that includes BYD. I think BYD could tomorrow decide we're ready to be profitable,
Mhm.
but they would sell fewer cars,
Mhm.
have less market penetration, and they would rather lose a little bit of money in this one division
Mhm. Mhm.
to expand their market rather than focus on the short term.
Right.
BYD at some point will raise prices, not necessarily raise them above what they are today, but raise what their expected margin is because they can.
Okay. Well, Brian, that's exactly what I was hoping for today. I hope it was valuable and interesting and useful for all of you out there. If you like listening to Brian, and 7 or 8 other people do, his mom and some others, I know, I've heard, even his kids from time to time look at his channel, and that's shocking. No, they
It
don't.
would be. It would be shocking.
Anyway, go over to Brian's channel, check him out. Also, hit his Patreon up from time to time, see if you could potentially support his channel. And then, like and subscribe here too. And Brian will be back probably on Tuesday, although the other Brian, who isn't necessarily always white, because he is, of course, Wang.
Sometimes.
And he might actually preempt the Tuesday show again, Brian, as he did last week, because I've got a really exciting idea about solar batteries I want to talk to him. I mean, solar panels I want to talk to him about. Anyway, we'll see. Whichever way it goes, you will be on again on my channel later this week. All right. And to all of you out there, it has been great talking to you. And that's it. Goodbye. See ya. What do you want to say? You got anything to say?
Sayonara,
Sayonara.
sucker.